Welcome back, everyone. This is Dr. A for Art Appreciation Sculpture Lecture. Hope everyone's doing well. And today we're going to start talking about three-dimensional art forms. Sculpture is really considered to be the oldest method that was used by artists. It's the first, or at least it's the evidence points to it's the oldest. So the oldest piece of art is a piece of sculpture, and there's, reason to believe it was due to things that were functional, of course, and we'll be looking at some of those when we get into the prehistoric period. It's kind of interesting to see the evolution of that. But as sculpture developed, what we began to see are two distinct types developing. Freestanding is one of the types that was sculpture that was not attached to any surface. It's meant to be viewed from all sides. You walk all the way around it. And I think this is what most people think of, when they think of sculpture. It definitely is something that I don't think that is unusual to any of you, because you've seen these things outside in public. So this is the norm. I think that's what people go to when I say sculpture. But there's also another type of sculpture, and it's called relief sculpture. It's meant to be viewed from one side only and projects from a background. All right, so it either can be low relief or high relief. Low, or bas relief, that's the artistic term for it, projects very slightly. Think of the image on a coin, those of you who still know what money is. And also there is high relief. In high relief work, the images project out more dramatically from the background, and the use of shadows and things like that comes more into play when we look at high relief. So these are your two basic ways to create a piece of sculpture. You can use, as far as methods and materials, a variety of things. Just like in painting, just like in any other art form, you have choices. So let's look at some of those. The three traditional ones, the ones that have been around the longest, are modeling, casting, and carving. Modeling is the oldest form. In modeling, you take a softer material that's often something like clay or something like wax, plaster today, and you build a work up. This is why we call this the additive process. You start at, maybe you have a little like form you put it on, the inner support called the armature, and then you build it around that. It is what you most of you, some of you, I shouldn't say most of you, but some of you have done as children when doing things like playing with Play-Doh. Sorry for the phone ringing in the background. Hold on a second. Okay, back to modeling. Modeling is, as I said, the additive process, and you build the surface up. Now, when you use something like clay, though, as you see here with this particular image, you also have to realize there's another part to this if you want to keep it permanent. You have to fire it, or think of it this way, cook it. And what you use is called a kiln. This has been done for thousands of years. Now, you can sun fire things, but it requires a very high degree of, the sun has to be intense, and it's not as stable as cooking it in a kiln. But people have been doing this for thousands of years. It was not above their abilities. And you can see here the kiln, here's the top of it. And this is where you build the fire in. And we know for a fact that the Egyptians were doing it. Here's from a tomb image. And we knew certainly the Romans were doing it. We see modeling being done in Africa. We see modeling being done around the world. So here's again, there's where the fire is. That's the firebox. And then you put the material, all those pieces in there, usually more than one. Let me adjust this so you can see the bottom. There you go. And refocus here real quick. And when you put the images in, this is reduces the open area. But what the secret is to keep the smoke very, it's mostly the heat. So you want to have not a lot of flame, but mostly just hot temperature. You can see here the stacking of material into a kiln, so you do more than one thing in a kiln. And today the modern kilns look like that. Again, let me adjust the view for you. I think I'll move back a little bit. There we go. And you can see that. And again, let me refocus that. Okay, good. Okay. I'll tell you my story about modeling. I did a clay piece in a 3D design class. And the secret to clay is to work it really, really a long time. You need it like dough, trying to get the air bubbles out. And I didn't do it long enough. And when I put my piece in the kiln with everybody else's from my class, luckily the instructor was very smart and he graded it before this happened. It exploded. And I was not well liked that day. So that was my lesson that maybe, I picked photography for a reason, because I didn't have enough patience to do all that kneading of the dough, if so to say, or the clay. People, though, who do this, do it for more than just simple, images. You can see here, there's some large pieces. This is a life-size image that can be put into a large kiln. There's big kilns in the world, There's a big one here in West Palm Beach. And you can get some pretty amazing pieces of work. So it just depends on what you're trying to achieve, what your look is going, what are you going for? And that's what artists choose. The subject matter and the material have to complement each other. Even more permanent type of methodology is casting. In casting, you begin with a soft material and then transfer that material into a harder substance, such as from clay to bronze. It's often called the substitution process. So let's look at this example. Here we have the softer thing you started out with was this woman's body. And so they put the mold on her and let it harden and pulled it off. And then you prepare the mold by coating it. And then you pour the liquid metal in, depending what you have and what type of look you're going for, bronze or whatever it is you're going for. Okay, so here we have the container. It's called the crucible, and then that's put into an oven and heated up until everything melts, and then you pour it into the mold, let it harden, and you have this beautiful, lasting piece. The next method, and here's some more examples of ancient casting. Sorry, I forgot to put these in here. Here's a piece from Rome, the story of Romulus and Remus. Okay, and the wolf who fostered them. I don't know if you know who they are. They were the founders of Rome. And also here, an African piece. Benin was an area, West Africa, that was really famous for casting. And so we have some really ancient pieces being done worldwide. Casting probably grew out of originally casting metals for weaponry, like arrowheads and things like that, spear tips. So, it definitely has a foundation of practicality. I think most art may. It's something to be thought of. The last method we're going to talk about today is carving. The last traditional method, I should say. In carving, you take away unwanted material. It's called the subtractive process. It's the most difficult of the processes because it allows little room for error. Also, it's physically demanding. So carving can be really strenuous. If you don't know anybody who does this type of artwork, it can really, you can see, it's in your arms. It's a lot of arm work. And this is the methodology I think most people think of, but it's just one of many. Depending on what type of material is going to depend on what type of tool you want. These are traditional tools. These are called rasps here. They're like files. These are chisels here, and these are hammers. It's a roughing hammer. Sorry about that again. But no, I'm sitting in my office and there's a phone in here. And for some reason, when I'm here working, it tends to want to ring. So sorry, please excuse that. Let's go back to carving. Carving also has different types of, obviously, material you carve. I think a lot of people think of marble, and that's very much a product of the inheritance of the Renaissance. But you can use woods. There's different kinds of stone. Here we have a really hard stone being used, and Henry Moore liked to use really like tough things like granite and things like that. And again, it's a physically demanding art form. People nowadays also use air tools, and it's a shortcut, but once you get down to the closer to the finished product, you definitely have to go to hand tools again in order to complete it. There's people who are folk artists who use chainsaws, and as you see, the material here is wood. This was somebody I saw carving in the side of the road when I was in North Carolina one time. Hey, it's still an art form. It's just, he's what we consider a folk artist. Folk artists are people who are untrained as far as going to a recognized art school, let's put it that way. But wood can be very beautiful in the hands of, a trained artist as well. Look at that. That's a beautiful piece. So it depends what you're looking for. Again, the material suits the subject matter. Now, once we get into the 19th century, more materials become available and the technology improves. We have things like soldering and welding comes into play. And by that late 19th century, there's going to be things like constructions developing, although certainly the early 20th century is the time period that this becomes most popular. A construction is when you have raw metals welded together, such as iron. All right, and it can be abstract like this, or they can be, remember, representational like this. The difference is it is not anything that has any other purpose, rather, in the metal is just the metal. Okay, because I'm saying this because there's a subset of this, and that is called, let's get up to there, an assemblage. In an assemblage, the pieces that you have already have an identity. Materials have other uses besides being a piece of art. Here you see on the left a piece called Bull's Head, done by Pablo Picasso. The seat that's metal and the handlebars of a bicycle, but rearranged and put together. And on the right, another Picasso, Baboon and Young. There's I don't know if you can see it inside here, is a cue ball, that's a marble, and those are two metal cars there. So an assemblage, again, a subset of that. Now, oops, sorry about that. I think coming out of that and my own interpretation of this, and it's something that I saw in a show one time, is we see reclaimed art. This comes from materials that are being reused. It's almost as if it's an environmental movement, if you will. In fact, it is an environmental movement. That's what I kind of see it as. And people like Sayaka Gantz can take some pretty mundane things like plastic forks and plastic hangers. Let's go close so you can see that. See that? And put them together and develop these absolutely amazing pieces. These horses, especially if they're lit like that, are just spectacular. And it's hard to believe. It's just plastic. She finds it's all, you know, been used. It's recycled essentially. And then she washes it and puts it together as sculpture. And you can see here the image that these are pieces that she sold in this kind of, it's like a disco nightmare room to me. But hey, everybody likes something different, right? We've got to be positive about that. So if that's your taste, it looks cool with the horses on the wall. I do love the round shape here. So interesting. There she is. She does other things besides horses. I just wanted to show you that. But it's I saw like a time-lapse video on her putting one of these together. I mean, it is labor intensive. I was quite impressed by that. In addition to these types of methodologies, you also have sculpture that moves. These are called kinetic pieces. And in kinetic artworks, this was a new thing developed, and again, in the early 20th century, we see it emerge. They move and sway and change, and it's kind of the interesting part about kinetic work. And then today, installations are quite popular. Installations are pieces that create their own environment. Okay, they have definitely influenced art in the last, I've been seeing installations now probably for 25 years. This one was at the Tate Modern in England, in London, and Olafur Eliasson, you need to look him up if you're interested in environmental artwork, is kind of on the forefront of this. He did this piece called The Weather Project, where one side of the museum, and if you ever get to go to London, which you should, I always encourage students to travel, the Tate Modern is an old electric company structure. And inside, it's huge. You know, there's like, oh God, I'm trying to remember. I was just there last summer. It's like 4 floors, 3 or 4 floors. And so this was done on the entire first floor. And it was about, of course, climate change. And one side was this what felt like very warm room. And the next side was this very cool room and the melting of the ice caps. He's done some pretty controversial things. Last summer, he had this about smog. And you walk through this smoke tunnel. It was amazing. I was like so impressed. Oops, there it is. And it was the effect of, you know, pollution in the air, the effect of smog on the atmosphere, and all of these things. And it was just so interesting. But he's known for that. There's other types of materials available, and I wanted to showcase one of them, Dale Chihuly, because unfortunately the Norton's not open right now, but if we had a chance, I'd recommend you going there for an extra credit, because there is a Chihuly there. And this too is an installation. It's also, not only does Chihuly do installations, but this one is definitely more site-specific. In site-specific work, it's designed for a specific place, all right? But his is more installation-like in that it's not permanent. And I saw this show 2 summers ago in the gardens of the Biltmore. If you've not been to North Carolina, a lot of people from here go there. So I thought I would put this in because maybe, you know, you have an opportunity to go to the house. It was a house built by one of the Rockefellers, and they had this beautiful garden. It's just spectacular if you like the outdoors, and they filled it with Chihuly work, and you can see it here. This is one I want for my backyard, but you know, I don't have a backyard that big. Beautiful glass forms. Now he's a glass blower. I did put a video in about Chihuly, so you'll find out a little bit more about him. He's pretty famous as far as he does a lot of work that people have seen. It's in like casinos and stuff like that. So you might have seen a Chihuly. I love these towers. And this is all blown glass. The whole thing. You can see here the big one in front of the house. And there's the house. Over 90 rooms and 3 people live there. Isn't that amazing? Now, installations or site-specific work are made for a specific spot. And that's why Chihuly's work is more installation-like, although some people argue some of those pieces are in permanent places worldwide, but not that one. They took that down, so that was an installation. But site-specific work is made for a specific spot, and these are permanent works. They interact with the environment. It's about an art in public places kind of aesthetic, if you will. And this is probably one of the most famous in America, so I chose to do that. This one, done by Maya Lin. It is the Vietnam War Memorial, and some of my students have seen this if you went to Washington, D.C. for the patrol trip. That's why I included it. Plus, it's a pretty impressive piece. It's interactive. The wall has that reflective quality, and on it are all the names of the people who died in Vietnam. It too was rather controversial at the time. A lot of people thought it wasn't going to work, but I think it does because people really they really get into it. They see the names of people. Maybe it was a family member, or some people, you know, they're there to see friends' names, and a lot of people bring papers and do rubbings of it, you know, it's tracing paper. And so it became more of a people's piece. So I thought that was kind of interesting about it. Maya Lin is a famous sculptor and architect. And she also did the Civil Rights Memorial in Atlanta. It's a really nice one too. It's all water on the top here. And it's all of the names of the people involved, and the water runs off. She does a lot of water stuff. Perhaps you've seen this one. I picked some of the famous ones from America. This is the Bean in Chicago, but its real name, which I always forget, is the, hold on, it's called the Cloud Gate, but everyone calls it the Bean. And it too, like the Vietnam War Memorial, is reflective. I think that's why people like it. I've never seen it. I lived in Chicago when I was a kid. It wasn't there then, but yeah, I've had students come back from Chicago or were from there, so that's why I included it. And my favorite site-specific piece is a glass piece in Venice. It's amazing to me. It's the glass star at the Campo Santo Stefano on Murano, where the glass, it's a famous, where the glass blowers and the glass plate makers live in Italy. So anyway, that's the end of the sculpture lecture today. I'm sorry about the phone ringing again. I do apologize. And I hope that you all enjoyed this, and we are going to talk about architecture, but I'll do that one in person in class. So I will see you later. Peace out, everybody.